Well, hello, friends, and welcome to From Busy to Rich, the podcast designed to inspire advisors to increase their profitability and quality of life for themselves and those they serve. I'm Justin Lakin here with your host, Wes Young. For those of you who are watching, you'll likely notice Wes is not in his normal environment. He's currently roughing it out there in Las Vegas. Ironically, it's a great city for what I think is today's topic and talking about untapped opportunities. Now, for us, we're going to be targeting, a more specific area of that in terms of untapped opportunities and kind of what we see and feel is one of the biggest untapped opportunities in our industry. And Wes, I know you have a story to share that really highlights the mindset around where we're going today.
Yeah, for sure. No, and just by way of background here, I am working while I'm in Las Vegas. I'm here for a conference, so I've got to spend the last couple of days with just an incredible group of advisors that are doing things uniquely and really challenging what the norms are. And so I've gotten a lot out of it, and I also had the privilege of doing a couple talks, and one of them was on this topic, Justin, and I heard this story many years ago, and I love what it speaks to. So there's a couple shoe salesmen. Both of them are running their own independent organizations, and they both decide to head to an island to expand their enterprises. So after a day full of kind of surveying the landscape that was available to them, they both send back word home. And the first one says, "Bad news, nobody on this island wears shoes. Stop production, I'll be headed home tomorrow." And the second one says, "Great news, nobody on this island wears shoes. Double production, I'll be staying an extra month." And what I believe we're going to talk about today, Justin, is this massive untapped opportunity in the space of holistic fee-based financial planning. And it has to do with something we'll call the tax dance. So it has to do with tax intelligence and coordination. And this space is just so underutilized and overlooked. And if people understand it and all of a sudden get where this can fit into your life organizationally, it will make you have a practice that asking for referrals is irrelevant because you get so many new people reaching out to you, knocking on your door. And it just makes you so much more effective and profitable in the life of the client. Because again, if our win is to help inspire people to increase profitability and quality of life, this particular tax dance of tax intelligence, tax coordination is one of the things that moves the needle on this tremendously. So,
yeah, I mean, just on that, like out of curiosity, what your thoughts are, or why do you think that is from a financial advisor world? I know it feels like having been in this industry for a while. A lot of people, it's almost like, well, that's the CPA bubble, and then you've got the other bubble that's over here for whatever else it is, and the attorney takes care of that. Why do you think there's always been some, I guess, kind of a separation from the mindset of our industry, which has led to this untapped opportunity of like actually engaging that in the overall holistic conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a couple things. I think first, we all inherit a model when we come into this business. And what is not present in that model from the financial advisor side is that you need to have tax intelligence to be able to coordinate the overall client situation with the CPA, because the other's true too. The CPA inherits a model. Most CPAs, the model they inherit is one of tax preparation, not proactive tax planning. So what they're doing is every year they're getting information from the client. The client is busy running their business. The client's tax intelligence generally is the same as it was when they first started out. And now all of a sudden taxes are one of the single greatest compressions of profitability that they have in their life. But their tax intelligence is still the same as it was when they were 20 and they were starting out. And everybody puts it in their hard pile, advisors included, that's that mystical magic land of tax, and tax code 77,000 pages plus, depending on the day and the font size you use. And so it's just one of those areas that I'll just leave that to the experts. The problem is nobody's really an expert on 77,000 pages of tax code. And when your model doesn't even, like most CPAs, it's here comes, March, here comes April, here comes October, and they're filing returns. And so not bad or wrong. You need people to file returns. You need to be compliant. You need them on time. But where we go with this is very different. So our model every year, we'll just take a brand new client coming in. And those of you who've taken Transform, we teach our model very specifically with language, why we say what we say, when we say it. But right up front, one of the things we notice, and we've got a list, and we'll talk about that later, this narratives checklist of all these tax plays that people like this person we're meeting with are running. And it just becomes very clear that this person's not running those plays. And there could be a good reason why they're not. We find many times it's just because they didn't know about them. They weren't brought up. They were never communicated to the CPA. No. And we will upfront say, hey, here's some examples of like when we do a tax analysis for you and coordinate this with your CPA, here's some examples of things that may apply in your case. Like when we're even seeing if we want to keep working with a client and determining what their fee is going to be. And we'll point out 3 or so areas to say, yeah, no, there's a lot more of these where this came from, but we demonstrated enough value with those 3 things we talked about to where if they're an ideal client for us, they're leaning in and they're saying, wow, nobody's ever talked to me about this stuff before. And so when they engage, and we do that, we actually have them upload to us their hopefully last 3 years tax returns, but at least the last 2 years. And we use Holistic Plan to kind of do an analysis quickly for us. And then we look at that narratives checklist and we say, all right, what plays are they not running that they could be running? And we outline those. And then we say, these are the things that we want to implement with you and your CPA this year, provided they don't have any reason to not implement them. And year 1, we're always saving massive amounts of money that was unnecessarily going away to the tax system just because the client didn't know about a rule or a law or a play they could run. So it's right off the bat, right up front. But then every year, Justin, as you know, we're coming into this season now, depending on when you're listening to the podcast, year-end strategy sessions. And our year-end strategy sessions are almost always involve doing a kind of a pro forma of where are we going to come at in this year? And we use Holistic Plan for that. We have what they were at last year, all the incomes they made. You can easily duplicate that and put it right next to the old plan and say, okay, now for 2024, what has changed? What incomes might have changed? What things might you have sold? What's going on in your life? And because we're so deeply familiar with everything going on, we can kind of populate that and then say, one, did you implement everything we talked about on your initial assessment? And many times the answer is like, oh, no, we still need to do that. And then 2 is, what other things might we want to pull the trigger on that we won't have the opportunity after the sun goes down on December 31st? And what happens there, that is, and that annual tax dance is going to exist forever. So every year, then you had that onboarding year where you're kind of getting your feet wet and familiarized with what they have going. You're doing your year end. But then every year after that, again, we have our mid-year strategy session. Every month, they're getting a strategy summary from us about the things that are in progress, things that are upcoming, and things that are on hold. And then year end. So you're always in this client's mind, and they're always at their peak, at least as much as you can get them there. I mean, you teach people to lose weight, you need to eat right, and you need to exercise. Now, some of them hadn't exercised, so it's like that familiar, hey, you need to exercise this play. Otherwise, it's going to cost you this amount of money if you don't. But man, here's the deal. And Justin, I'd love you to talk about your observation of this coming from outside a world that did not do this to then inside of our world, because every week, I think last week we had 3 people reach out to us that were friends of existing clients that said, hey, you work with so-and-so. They told me you did this really cool thing had this ideas about tax that you coordinated with their CPA. Can we meet? Can we learn more about what it is you do? And now we still manage the money. We still put in place insurance. We still make sure the wills and trusts are there, all the things that come along with holistic planning. But it is like our clients are our best representatives in the marketplace at getting us people who come in with pursuant influence. They are like, I want to meet. I'm almost already willing to sign up. Just let me do that. So thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, having come from not doing fee-based planning and then switching over and then engaging on it, you hit the nail on the head of like the tax intelligence piece and coordination. It's so easy when thinking about it to think that you're somehow switching into a tax advisor, and that is not at all what we're doing.
Absolutely.
It's more of expanding knowledge into other areas so that you can do that coordination dance with the CPA and with the client and everything else to be able to bring in a true bigger picture planning atmosphere of like just knowing what tools are in the toolbox, right? You're able to take a look at the job that's being done and say, hey, based on your situation, you're using a hammer and a nail. This may be one of those screw and an actual power tool scenarios.
Yeah.
And then just coordinate that with the CPA so that they're able to then implement that. Like, yeah, that's a great idea. Or I see where you're going with that. Like maybe if we adjust it here and here, this fits into it. And so it changes the dynamic as well from an influence standpoint and how people receive what we're talking about and how they start utilizing. Because I notice is not only are they referring, additional clients and having those conversations, but then also before they do stuff, they're starting to ask questions ahead of time. Like the dynamic changes versus kind of like on a back end and slowly feeding you information. They start
Yes.
coming to you more frequently of like, hey, I was thinking about doing this, instead of after the fact saying, well, I wish you would have come and talked to us about that. We could have done some stuff a little differently or brought that up.
No, I love that. And so again, if our win is to help inspire people to increase profitability and quality of life, doing the tax dance is so essential to that occurring. So I think the other side of that is, let's say your practice isn't there yet. You have not been doing this with clients, and you're going to begin to learn to implement it. The tax dance works in not just having clients refer new clients to you, but also when you're describing what you do in the marketplace. I was literally at playing a blackjack next to a guy at here in Las Vegas, and naturally it comes up, what do you do? And I said, well, it's easy to have the tax system compress your profit, be one of the largest single expenses. And he said, I know exactly what you're talking about. I own this business, and man, if I didn't have to pay taxes, I could pay off my house. I could do these 8 things. And I'm like, yeah, we help people with things like that. I said, I own a financial planning company. We work with people that own businesses to help them identify and pursue profitable financial opportunities. To which he did what almost everybody does when I've said those things. Well, how does that work? Like, are you a CPA? I said, no. I said, what we do, we start by asking a ton of questions about where you're at from a financial standpoint and about all the things you care about, the future that you're moving towards and want to create. And then once we know that, we can have some great dialogue in the areas of planning that may be most relevant. Like, let me give you an example. And Justin, we use these frequently just because they're so easy, quick, and portable. But you might use the example of paying your kids. You might use the example of renting your house for 14 days. There are plenty of examples out there. And on our narratives checklist, which we'll talk about in a second, we have hundreds of ideas that could pertain to this client. What you're doing in this moment is just trying to give them enough to they go, I want to know more about that. And just like happens when this guy, I said, hey, like, we had a client, they have 3 kids and they're all between the ages of 13 and 18. They have a family business, and we asked him, do you pay your kids? And he says, yeah, I pay for all their stuff. I pay for their, their extracurricular activities, their car, the insurance in the car, their food. I'm like, yeah, but did you know you could pay them all pretty close to $15,000 this year, and you'll get a full tax deduction for it at your 37% rate. They don't pick it up as income, and then they can go pay for all those things, their golf, the band, all those things. And for you, what that's going to do is create another $16,000+ of money that was disappearing unnecessarily to the tax system for spending money you would have spent anyway. You're just doing it through the appropriate, which if your kids are working for you, you should be paying them the appropriate channel. So, and he's like, we got to exchange information because I want to meet. But Justin, what nobody talks about at a party is, you should hear my advisor's asset allocation plan, or you should hear my advisors. They got me this really cool insurance,
Yeah.
Table stakes. Be great at those things. You got to be.
Yeah, no one's bringing up their term insurance, right? Like, right? Like, I just added $5 million in term insurance.
Yeah,
right? Like, it's great, fits into your planning and modeling, but that's not the exciting stuff.
It's all important, but it's not all portable and interesting enough to where people want to lean in. And so this is that area. It is the salesman that recognizes nobody's wearing shoes, guys. Nobody is wearing tax dance shoes in this thing. So put on your tax dancing shoes is what we would recommend to you here. And we're going to give you some very practical ways to do that.
Yeah, it's also the things that equip you in such a competitive environment where there's a lot of good advisors. There's a lot of good wealth managers out there. Like, what makes you different? Like, what added capability do you have that's going to make you unique in that situation and stand out? And this one, clearly, for us, we found that like this is that area, and in terms of untapped potential. So if I'm guessing, if I know how I felt coming into this realm and starting to do this, like one of the first questions I know I had is like, well, how do I start learning about all these tools? And like, where do I start from just like an educational standpoint, like so I can start being able to be smart and have that tax intelligence?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a number of great things out there. One of them, which we make available to everybody that goes through Transform, is our narratives checklist. And that's something we use every week as a team, where we have literally hundreds of ideas. And what we're doing is we're preparing for a client meeting, or in this case, assessing the client's tax world. We're going through and we're asking the question, does that one apply? Does that one apply? Does that one apply? Also, we've taken it a step further with that. Is many of those ideas, you can click the idea, that little bullet point, and you have a 2-minute video of me explaining what that idea is and how I would explain it to a client. So it's an enormously beneficial resource, because if you're just sitting around trying to use your memory or use your mind for recall, your energy for recall of what is the list of ideas, don't do that. There's not a value in that. Have a list of ideas already out there that you can just go down the checklist. Does this apply? Does this apply? So we are going to make it available to our podcast listeners. And if you go to the show notes, there's going to be specific instructions on how to get this. But where for a couple weeks, we'll just let you see it. We'll let you see the narrative checklist and have full access to that and the videos. We're always updating and upgrading it all the time, adding new videos to it. And then if you want to subscribe to that, that's a $500 a year subscription for you to continue to have access to that particular tool that we provide. So we've seen that as a game changer. Also seen it as a great educational tool. If you're not familiar with this stuff, start clicking the idea and learn. And just go down the list, and you're going to see tons of things that are going to show up in 90% of your clients' lives, both for people that own businesses, people that don't, and in a whole bunch of other areas as well. So I'd say that's one area, Justin. Some other spots that you can really get sharp is you should be listening every week to the Small Business Tax Savings Podcast. Mike Jezicek, who's a friend of mine and longtime supporter of our programs, he has a weekly podcast that comes out, and he just goes over things that are applicable to the tax world that you might not have been aware of. And he goes over how to implement things. So if you listen to that every week for 6 months, you're going to have more tax intelligence than 90% of the world out there. Also, he has a tax course, that Tax Elm, that you can belong to, where there's white papers, there's learning, you can submit questions to him on specific things that you wonder about. So Mike's a great resource. I'd also bring up the Bradford Tax Institute. They have a monthly newsletter that they send out, but they also have all this treasure trove of libraried information that you can go look up questions. And he's got a unique way of thinking about it. Because there's tax like law, and then there's application of that law. And he's really good around here's how this applies or could apply in a client's case. One other area, and this is awesome, is Claude AI. Claude AI is Claude.ai, and you could use Chat GPT, Claude AI, Perplexity. That's another one that's popular out there. But this is great because we like Claude just because we tend to like the answers it gives us most of the time. But Justin, I mean, there's not a week that goes by that we're not on our Monday prep sessions where we're like, can we do this? Does this work in this? And none of us have the answer, but we type it into Claude. And then within a second, Claude gives us the answer. And then you can say, hey, cite your sources. So we know that's not Claude taking this from, somebody that's going to go to jail for tax evasion, their website.
Somebody's Twitter post or something like that.
Yeah, TikTok. And not that those things can't be true, but we want to make sure it's grounded in the tax code, right? So, and then many times if we're still it's not black and white, we'll just take that nice little output that Claude gives us, go paste it in an email. I might send it to Mike Jezicek and say, hey, Mike, is this an accurate way of describing this? And they'll go, oh yeah, or yeah, but you got to add this thing in here. So you have at your fingertips things that are available for you to get smart in this space really fast. And just frankly, here's the deal. You're never going to master it because, as I said earlier, there's 77,000 pages to the tax code and it changes all the time. And so, but being tax intelligent does not require you to know all 77,000 pages. It requires you to be curious, have a list of things that are plays you could probably run that you know that you internalize. And if you have like questions, resources to go get answers to those questions. Last tool that I would say is just awesome that we use regularly is Holistiplan. Holistiplan you can upload their personal tax returns, so they're 1040, and it's going to give you a nice little succinct summary of everything that they've got going on. You can do side-by-side comparisons with what if they change these things. And it's going to even point out some opportunities for you. Doesn't do it as much on the business side. That's where like the narratives checklists and these other resources we've talked about are real important. But it's just a fantastic like area. It's like nobody in the island's wearing shoes, Justin. And if they would just like double production, guys, because people are thirsty for this and you can make a huge difference with it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. And it's one of those things that like, again, you don't have to have years of experience already to then access to start having these conversations. All of these things accelerate that. Holistiplan will do the summary and even give you like off of their general report. If you're not used to looking at 1040s and digging through all that stuff, such an amazing place to start to say like, hey, we're going to summarize this in just some more common language of here you go. Here's where this is. Here's what this is. So then you can start having conversations and use the narrative checklist on that piece. And again, we're not trying to make a recommendation of like, hey, this is what you should do. These are like, hey, here's some things that may be worth discussing. And let's coordinate this conversation and continue the collaboration with your CPA so we can refine down what is the actual path forward here.
Yeah. And you know, I mean, it truly, all these tools, they're creating awareness where there is none. People would love to wear the shoes if you showed them to them. They would get the benefit from the shoes. They can exist without it. They just may suffer unnecessarily. And so all we're trying to do is put your tax shoes on, start dancing. Use these tools that we've talked about. Take advantage of the offer that we're giving, where you can check out our narratives checklist and then subscribe to it on an ongoing basis going forward. But this is a game changer. And of course, we'd always love you to join our Transform community, where we go into depth of exactly our approach to this, our annual calendar, how we work on all these things, and we can do it in a much deeper way than what we can just do in a short format podcast like we operate. So, yeah, I think those are that's really the deepness of what I wanted to hit today.
Awesome. Now, again, as Wes mentioned, I'll make sure in the show notes you'll be able to find links to be able to access that document we're talking about, the narratives checklist, where you have the videos and stuff for the first 2 weeks post-launch. And we really hope you enjoyed the episode just overall. And if you want to see, there's additional resources while you're there. Poke around, wesyounglive.com. There's a ton of other things that a lot of people aren't even aware exist. So we encourage you to go find some additional free resources and then some other content that you have access to. So until next time, thank you all for listening.